Good morning. Thank you all so much for being here. Danny, thank you for leading us in song. Nancy and Carol, thank you for also leading us in song. We've sang some songs that take two parts, and I'm just glad we had two parts here to sing with. Thank y'all so much for being here. So many things I could, just kind of joke whenever our attendance is light. But somebody said the other night that we had just as many on Wednesday night that we had on Sunday morning. And so not every church can brag for that. So silver lining right there. You're just going to have to laugh extra hard at the jokes is what you're going to have to do today. Pick up the slack here. The late Irma Bombeck wrote some New Year's resolutions one year, and these were her New Year's resolutions. She says, I'm going to clean this dump just as soon as the kids grow up. She said, I will go to no doctor whose office plants have died. She said, I'm going to follow my husband's suggestion to put a little excitement into my life by living within our budget. She said, I'm going to apply for a hardship scholarship to Weight Watchers. She said, I'm never going to loan my car to anyone I've given birth to. And she said, just like last year, I'm going to remember that my children need love the most when they deserve it the least. And I thought that was kind of neat. We said that Jesus calls us to a higher form of love. He calls us to love one another. It's hard enough to follow the golden rule, treat others as you'd want to be treated, but Jesus lays out the platinum rule. He says that we should love one another as we have been loved by God. And this level of anothering, it takes a deliberate decision to make it happen, because you're not going to stumble into anothering. You've got to make a decision to be a next level, a platinum level anotherer. Anotherers are serious about relationships because they're serious about discipleship. And solitary discipleship is a contradiction in terms. And so what we're looking to do in this series is to explore what it means to another at another level. So what we're going to look at is we're going to talk about how do we encourage one another? How do we greet one another? How do we accept one another? How do we forgive one another? All of these anothers that the New Testament talks about. But before we get into any one of those, we have to begin with the foundation. We have to begin with what we're going to build on. And it's taken out of Romans chapter 12. So if you've got a Bible and you want to open up to Romans chapter 12 and see this, Paul is going to say that we have to remember to member one another. Paul says in Romans chapter 12, verse 4, for just as each of us has one body with many members, and these members do not have all the same function, so in Christ we, though many, form one body, and each member belongs to all the others. And I am persuaded that we cannot become better anotherers unless we come to a better understanding of what it means for us to be members of one another. What does it mean for us to belong as members to one another? Because anothering is intentional, but it is not institutional. But it can be very easy for it to become institutional. And I'm going to try to unpack that to make my point. One of the most unique aspects of the Christian faith is incarnation. We talked about that a little bit. I guess it was just Paula and I talked a little bit about the incarnation, about how odd it is for God to wrap flesh around himself and to come to this earth. There's no other religion that has anything close to this. The story of God becoming flesh and living with his creation. That's heresy to a lot of world religions. But we believe that God came to this earth in the person of Jesus Christ. But just as unique to the Christian faith is the concept of a continuing incarnation. Because yes, Jesus did live in the flesh on the earth for a little over 30 years. And we know that Jesus is right now in the flesh sitting at the right hand of God, but we also know that Jesus is still in the flesh on the earth, in his body, which is the church. Paul says in Colossians chapter 1, verse 18, Christ is the head of the church, which is his body. And this is fundamental to who we are. It is critical to move forward and be healthy as members of one another, because the church is an organism. It is not an organization. If you look at the metaphors that the church is talked about in the New Testament, you'll notice that there is a constant theme of something that is living. The New Testament will talk about the church as vines, or as a bride, or as a temple that is made of living stones. And it's significant for this reason, because sometimes we think of the best way to improve things at church is, well, we got to come up with a better system. We got to come up with better structures. We'd have more people here if we just had maybe a better programming, better system, and it's tempting. As church leaders, it's tempting to say, I know how to solve this problem, and I can solve the problem with a structure or with a program. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to correct an organic problem, because anothering has got to be intentional, but it's got to transcend the institutional. Because the church is Jesus's body, and it gives the idea of membership a totally different mental idea, because we ought to change the way that we use the word member. The majority of the time I have heard church people use the word member. They use it in a way that is actually foreign to the New Testament. It's not used that way in the early church, because membership is something that you practice. It's not something you place. And you've heard it before. So-and-so has placed membership with this church, or that person is no longer a member of this church. And I understand what they're trying to say, but we've got to be careful with that kind of language, because the New Testament doesn't use that kind of language. It reflects a club mentality. You've probably been a member of a club. You've been a member of a booster club, or a PTO, or a book club, or a gardening club, or the Boy Scouts. Now, in a club, how do you remain a member in good standing? It's really fundamentally three things. You've got to regularly attend meetings, you've got to keep the rules of the club, and you've got to pay your dues. Now, that defines for many churches what it means to be a good member. They show up most Sundays, they don't have any big scandals in their lives, and when they're here, they give. They're members in good standing with us. But is that how the word is used in the New Testament? And that's the problem. The kind of definition that we have traditionally used about membership and what it means, it's that club language, and it allows you to belong to the club, but doesn't allow you to belong to anybody else there. It allows you to belong to the institution without ever actually participating in the body. And Paul says in the book of Romans, he says in chapter 12, we are members of the body of Christ, and all the members belong to each other. And as long as membership is something that you place, it's going to be possible for members to lose their place and not know it. Because you can't lose a part of your physical body and not know it. Now, I got out of my car Thursday because I went to Lowe's. I walked into Lowe's. All my body was in Lowe's, but I had left my wallet in the car. Now, my wallet always goes with me. You would see my wallet, and you would think that wallet is connected to Justin. That wallet goes everywhere Justin goes. But I walked into Lowe's without my wallet. I've never walked into Lowe's without my arm. I would notice if I had lost a member of my body. Now, the illustration that I want to use falls apart here a little bit, but go with me. If you were Satan and you wanted to try to steal members from a church, if you wanted to try to take people away from this church, Imagine that you were going up to a building that was under construction. The building is being built. Let's say there's a lot of brick that are mortared together, and there's construction material all around the building site and everything. And you wanted to go and you wanted to take the individual pieces. You wanted to take a brick. You wanted to take part of this building with you. Where would you go? Would you go to the wall that's already put up where the brick are already connected together with mortar? Or would you go over to the pile where the brick are together, but they're not connected? I know where I would go. I'm not going to go where they're already put together and connected to each other. I'll go where they're together but not connected. If Satan is going to steal members of the church, this is where he's going to go. He's going to go where people are not connected to each other. Why do churches lose members? Why do so many people say today that they're done with church? There's churches right now that have ministers that are called they're called ministers of involvement. I used to make fun of people for having that. Well, that's kind of silly. I don't make fun of them anymore. I think they're on to something. He said, because if we're going to be next level anotherers, we've got to learn how to be members to each other. We've got to learn how to be connected to each other and not just members of a club. And so what would that practice mean for us? I'm going to read a long text from 1 Corinthians 12. So if you want to flip from Romans over to 1 Corinthians 12, I want to ask what would happen if we took the New Testament ideas of membership seriously. Paul says this in 1 Corinthians 12, starting in verse 12. Paul says, and again, he's writing to the church at Corinth, a historically disconnected church. Now, it doesn't look disconnected. They had a lot of people showing up at church. They had a lot of members. But you know something about the members? They're off in different places. They're off disconnected. This group's over here doing this. This group's over here doing this. They're not together. And Paul wants to correct this. And the illustration he uses is that of a body. Verse 12, he says, just as a body, though one, has many parts, but all its many parts form one body. So it is with Christ. For we were all baptized by one Spirit, so as to form one body, whether Jews or Gentiles, slave or free, and we were all given the one Spirit to drink. Even so, the body is not made up of one part, but of many. Now, if the foot should say, because I am not a hand, I do not belong to the body, it would not for that reason cease to be part of the body. And if the ears should say, because I'm not an eye, I do not belong to the body, it would not for that reason cease to be part of the body. If the whole body were an eye, where would the sense of hearing be? If the whole body were an ear, where would the sense of smell be? But in fact, God has placed the parts in the body, every one of them, just as he wanted them to be. If they were all one part, where would the body be? As it is, there are many parts but one body. The eye cannot say to the hand, I don't need you. And the head cannot say to the feet, I don't need you. On the contrary, those parts of the body that seem to be weaker are indispensable. And the parts we think are less honorable, we treat with special honor. And the parts that are unpresentable are treated with special modesty, while our presentable parts need no special treatment. But God has put the body together, giving greater honor to the parts that lacked it, so there should be no division in the body, but that its parts should have equal concern for each other. If one part suffers, every part suffers with it. If one part is honored, every part rejoices with it. Now you are the body of Christ, and each one of you is a part of it. So, what does this mean? To try to biblically remember to member. The first thing it means, and this is the first blank on your outline, is that no member is sufficient alone. That was a big one for me to try to come up with, because I'm a very much I can do it myself person. I'm very much of a I don't need anyone else person. God has had to humble me several times over to realize just how insufficient I am. And this concept of body membership doesn't just challenge me, it challenges the value that our culture places on independence. Because that's not how a body thinks. A body doesn't think independently. For example, my hand is a very important part of my body. I use my hand to drive. I use my hand to work. I use my hand to put pizza in my mouth. I do a lot of very important things with my hand. But if you were to cut this hand off from this body, this hand is going to putrefy and it's going to rot because it's been cut off from the body. Now, an anotherer, somebody that is a next level anotherer, is never going to look out at the body and say, there's people here I don't need. There's people here I can do without. Because the body values participation, not isolation. Now, last night for dinner, Michelle made salads. Her salads are epic. They are so good. They have spinach, carrots, celery, cauliflower, radishes. I wrote it down so that I wouldn't leave out all the things she chops up. It is amazing. Broccoli, cucumbers, cheese, chicken, croutons, honey mustard on the side. It is fantastic. And I'm sitting here with this bowl of salad. I'm eating this last night. And my body is looking at this salad and going, yum. And my body is looking at all the individual components of this salad and saying to each one of these components, we want you to become part of this body. We want you to become part of this body. Now, what happens if one of those foods says, I don't want to become part of this body. I want to keep my own identity because I want to be my own person. I want to be myself. My body would say, that is not how this works. And my body would have disfellowshipped whatever part it was that didn't want to become part of the body. I look at all these things and I'm thinking, God has given us all of these blessings, all of this wonderful food to be part of our body. He's given us all of these wonderful people to be part of our body. But it's so human, it's so natural for a person or even a church to say we don't need anyone else. There was a church in Laodicea, or a church in Revelation, the church at Laodicea. Now, Laodicea, what was their thing that Jesus said to them? Jesus comes to them and says, you say, I don't need anything. I'm self-sufficient. What did Jesus say to them? Jesus said, you keep up that kind of talk, I'm going to disfellowship you from my body. I'm going to spit you out. Now, anotherers understand they don't just need love from other people. They need other people to love. Because nobody in the body is sufficient by themselves. That's the first thing that would happen in the body if we remembered to member. The second thing would happen is we would realize that everybody, every member is important. That's the second thing on your outline. Body membership doesn't value sufficiency, it values equality. Everybody here is important. Verse 13 from the Message reads like this. It says, by means of his one Spirit, we all said goodbye to our partial and piecemeal lives. We each used to live independently, calling our own shots. But then we entered into a large and integrated life in which he has the final say in everything. This is what Paul wants the church at Corinth to get. This is where he wants them to mature and get to in their walk with Christ. They're already Christians. He wants them to live out the calling. Why? Why is Paul so concerned to write letter after letter to this church in Corinth? It's because they're on the crossroads of humanity. Everybody can see them. And what would it be like if you had a body here where ethnic walls didn't matter? Gender walls didn't matter. Socioeconomic walls had disappeared. Where people from all these different walks of life, from all these different spectrums, all these different opinions, all these different political groups, all these different, refuse to let the different keep them apart. Their goal was because they belonged to Christ, it meant they belonged to each other. Now, people hadn't seen that since Eden. And club membership will never get you there. In fact, you already know how to decide who's most important at a club. You walk into any club, you'll find out quickly who's most important. You look at who's sitting at the head table, whose picture's on the wall, whose name is on the building, who's been there the longest, whose parents started it. And it's really easy to bring that kind of mentality into a church building and find out, I know who's the most important, who's been here the longest, who's given the most. Bodies don't think that way. God made bodies to care about all the members of the body, even those parts that you don't think is all that important, even the parts that you don't think, even the parts that you can't see. You see, I think my two hands are important because I can see them. They're halfway pretty. I can't see my two lungs. I would rather have a picture of my hands be displayed than a picture of my two lungs right now. But if you made me choose between my two hands and my two lungs, I'm going to choose my two lungs. And when the church is at her best, she understands that there are so many people that are out there giving of themselves thoughtlessly. They rarely get noticed. They don't get applauded. And they're fine. They're perfectly fine just being the lung. They're perfectly fine being the liver. They're perfectly fine playing their part because they don't need the recognition. They don't need the name on the wall. They just want to belong to the people that are there. And your body gets this. Paul says that every member rejoices with each other, with the other members. I've told you this story before about a time that, I never thought about my pinky toe. I never thought about my pinky toe. I don't think about my pinky toe except just every once in a while I look at it and go, wow, we need to get the clippers. I don't think about my pinky toe very much until it's the middle of the night and a piece of furniture jumps out at me and I hit it, and my whole body that had not given any thought whatsoever to the pinky toe is now jumping up and down dancing. Everybody is thinking we've got to help the pinky toe. Paul says God wanted all parts of the body to care for each other. And that doesn't happen in clubs. It happens in bodies. I'm not opposed to programs. I think some programs are good. I think some programs are smart. I think a minister of involvement's a good thing for churches to have. Programs can promote care, but they can't produce it. And we're not going to survive unless we belong to each other. And so anotherers care because they understand that they are connected to each other because we are in Christ. And if something is affecting you, I may not understand it, but I need to feel the effects as if it is affecting me because we're all members of a body. And then one more thing, this is the last blank on your outline, is that all members seek harmony for the body. In a club, everybody can go their own way. But in a body, the parts submit to the will of the whole. Anotherers don't have their own way. Anotherers are willing to tolerate anything if it's a blessing to the body. And that is a maturity level that few churches get to. It's the reason why so many churches end up in fights and feuds and splits is because they don't belong to each other. They belong to a club. They've joined a club. And they're more concerned with their own preferences. They're more concerned with what channel is on the TV. And I use that illustration because there was one time this comic strip, it's Peanuts, and it's Lucy and Linus, and it's what's on your thing right there. And it starts off by Lucy walking in. Linus is sitting in front of the television, and Lucy walks in and says, change the channel. And Linus is quiet for a second, and she said, did you hear me? Change the channel. And Linus says, why? And you can see what Lucy's answer are right there. She says, these 5 fingers, individually, they're nothing. But when I curl them together like this into a single unit, they form a weapon that's terrible to behold. If you know Lucy, that's Lucy. Now, Linus stands up with Lucy now watching what channel she wants to watch. And Linus is looking at his own hand and he's saying, why can't you guys come together like that? When a body does come together and all the members work together for Jesus' agenda, it is a powerful thing to behold. And Satan knows this. He knows the power of a united body, and he is very quick to sow discord. And it is so much easier for Satan to create strife and worry when Christians think they're just part of a club. And if they don't get their own way, they're just going to go down the street to the other club. It's hard for Satan to pull a brick out.